Before we dive into helicopter parenting, indulge me in a little made-up scenario. Picture two 18-year-olds, let's call them William and Harry. These two just woke up in their dorms and have the very first day of university ahead of them. Harry is outgoing, confident, and he bounced out of his room on time, despite having a little bit of a hangover from the party the night before. He pulled on his most spiffy of outfits because he is out to make an impression with students and professors. William, on the other hand, poor old William, he did not go to that freshers party as he was just too lonely, so he stayed in and FaceTimed his family at home. Despite being hangover free, he was going to be late to that first class even before he got lost because he spent way too long that morning figuring out how the iron worked and how to use the toaster. There's plenty of differences between William and Harry, obviously, but the question I want to leave you with for a minute or two is this. Who is more psychologically mature? Party boy Harry or sensible but lost William? Before I get to the answer to that, and I tell you the link between William, Harry, helicopter parenting, and anxiety, my name is Oliver, and I'm a clinical director and a family systems therapist, and I love helping parents and teens and kids reconnect and grow great relationships. Let me lay out the foundation of the My People Patterns approach to what parenting is. I'll be quick, it's worth it, and it's very relevant to helicopter parenting and anxiety. On that note, there's a helicopter parenting quiz on mypeoplepatterns.com, and I'll put the link below. If you sign up for our email list, I'll send you a very detailed parenting style assessment so you can figure out more of your parenting style and what that means. If you think about it, parenting styles are just different ways of doing the same thing. So a parent who is really tough with rules or who is super controlling, we might call them authoritarian or a high achievement parent. It's just to separate them out from other parenting styles who are more lenient. But the point is that all parenting styles have some degree of rules and some degree of controlling behaviors in them. Think about that 3-year-old who is about to touch the very hot oven. Every parenting style would yell, "Stop, be careful, that's hot," right? So all parents have to exert some element of control at some point. It's just the degree to which they do it and for how long that puts one parent in one parenting style and another in a different category. Controlling behaviors is just one element of being a parent, and there's 5 or so others that I think are really important to explore. The first one is warmth. Now, it was only a few hundred years ago did we think that kids were just miniature barbarians who needed discipline beaten into them to make them functioning adults. True story. Fortunately, in the past 100 years or so, we've realized that children actually need warm, loving feelings from their caregivers in order to become well-adjusted young adults. Some parents are more warm than others, some are even cold, so we can put that on a scale. The second one is acceptance. If you think back to your childhood, you hopefully had parents who were, for the most part, accepting of you. In an ideal world, we want parents who are totally 100% accepting of us, our strengths, our quirks, our weaknesses, our character flaws, all of it. But unfortunately, parents are human beings, and that always complicates things, so I don't think any parent is fully accepting. So again, let's put that on a scale with some parents being very accepting and others being very rejecting. This includes various aspects of their children. So parents can reject or accept a child's neediness, various feelings, their creativity, their love of dance. It's a broad spectrum of things that parents can be accepting or rejecting of, and different parenting styles are going to have dials set at different positions. The next one is expectations. Human beings are wired for connection. We are super attuned to the very important people in our lives, and we're sensitive to their moods, their well-being, their anxiety, and their health. In terms of the evolution of our species, we still totally need to keep our parents relatively happy as we're so dependent on them to stay alive. Part of keeping the adults who are in charge of keeping us alive, getting us food, keeping us warm, is being attuned to their moods and their expectations. If we meet them, we're probably going to continue to get food and warmth. Now, if we don't, we might be in trouble. and we would feel that with some sort of anxiety increase in us. The idea behind that anxiety peak is that it's going to motivate us to change our behaviors so that hopefully we get back in their good books and meet their expectations and continue to get food and warmth. Meeting our caregivers' expectations was important for our very survival as a species back in the day, but today we're still wired to get anxious when we don't meet expectations of our caregivers. And these expectations that our caregivers have need to be spoken clearly, or they can be unspoken and unclear. That would mean that we're constantly guessing and working out what our parents want of us. So again, I've got a big spectrum going on around expectations. Control of behaviors. I already explained a little bit how parents need to be controlling of their child's behaviors to some degree. And that's just a matter of keeping your kid alive, stopping them from running into traffic. Things get a little bit more complicated as a teenager though. Teens are in that really awkward stage between being a kid and becoming a young adult, and they have more urges to break away from the family and be a person outside of the prison that is their family. Ideally, as we were young teenagers, we wanted our parents to be less controlling of our behaviors. And you can imagine this can be a source of a lot of very normal parent-teen conflict when parents are too controlling and the teen wants to be more independent. Now, other types of parents aren't controlling enough, and the setting on their dial is lower than a different type of parent. And we might call these parents more permissive or even disengaged. The risk is with these parents is that their teenagers don't have any limits or rules imposed on them, so they get into trouble with the law or start using substances simply because nobody's ever told them what's wrong or right and what they can or can't do. The final part of parenting is perhaps the most important one. It's about psychological autonomy. Now, the previous scale was all about controlling a child's behaviors. This is about controlling the child's psychological independence. Newborn babies are entirely dependent on their caregivers for literally everything. And there's actually one school of thought that believes that very young babies don't understand that their parents are actually separate beings. But as we get older, we become less dependent on them. And actually, at around the age of 2, we suddenly realize that we are a self and those parents are others. And with this realization comes the understanding that we have agency and power and free will. And what do we say? No. We say no to everything. Some kids can do this to a very annoying degree, so we call it the terrible twos. But what it's all about is the first time we get to exert our independence from our parents. If all goes well, by the time of 18 or so, we're entirely independent of our parents and our caregivers. That would be in part because we've become psychologically autonomous. We are independent beings who can, for the most part, take care of ourselves. Psychological autonomy is another scale of parenting, and we would hope our parents encourage us to be increasingly independent the older we get. Parents should move that slider down the closer to 18 we get. And again, different parenting styles do different things. Now, the opposite of psychological autonomy would be dependence. So let's go back to Harry and William and the question of who is more psychologically mature. What I'm really asking by that is who is the least dependent on their parents and who is the most independent. And it seems to me that Harry is kind of ready to be an adult. He went to that party, he got a little wasted, but still made it to class on time, remembered to dress to impress. The hangover thing does sound a bit immature, but it's actually age-appropriate immaturity that we're going to hope he grows out of. William, on the other hand, spent his first night at university on the phone home. He didn't know how to cook toast or use the iron, and he just seems to be a bit helpless. It seems to me that he needs someone to help him get his act together. But the very fact that he needs someone to help organize him is a sign of psychological immaturity. In other words, he's dependent on someone else for a lot of things another guy his age can do by himself. But that is psychological autonomy, and it's vital to understand as a parent. It's all to do with anxiety and very much to do with helicopter parenting. The more anxious we are as parents, the more controlling we get. It's easy to see how an anxious parent might be more controlling of behaviors. It's a little harder to see how they might be more controlling of psychological autonomy. For some parents, keeping their child safe and secure means keeping the child dependent on that parent. These parents don't encourage their child to become independent. They don't tell their teen they're old enough to do their own ironing or teach them how the toaster works. For some of these parents, watching their child become an adult is just too distressing for them, so they don't encourage it. And for other types of parents, it's too distressing to see their child fail or fumble at doing the ironing or trying to use the toaster, so they just do it for them. Behind both of these things, though, is a lot of anxiety. And this anxiety is what promotes the helicoptering, the fussing over, and the doing for, all of which are parts of being a helicopter parent. All of that fussing, doing for, helicoptering, though, comes at an expense of psychological autonomy. And that psychological autonomy is vital for kids to become independent, happy young adults. Okay, so how do you encourage psychological autonomy? Well, there's 3 parts to it. The first part is it happens in relationship, which is weirdly paradoxical because to become independent, I'm saying that you actually need to be in a relationship. That relationship can't be too smothering or too close. There has to be space for a sense of self to develop. And it can't be too distant or cold because that's not really being in a relationship. Emotional regulation. Children have to be allowed the space to have their feelings, feel their feelings, in order to learn that they can tolerate them, that they can work them out, and that they can soothe them. Helicopter parents and snowplow parents have a tendency to rush in and soothe feelings or prevent them from having feelings. And that is a real problem in the development of psychological autonomy. So if that parent is always rushing in to fix feelings or prevent feelings from happening, children grow into young adults who still need someone else to be responsible for calming them down. And William, in our little vignette, felt anxious the night before school, rightly so, and called home. And we're going to presume that he did this unconsciously so that his parents could calm his anxiety. Now, if you think about it, Harry was probably just as anxious about the first day of school, but he managed to calm himself down by himself. The final part of psychological autonomy is about responsibility. As children get older, they need to feel increasing amounts of responsibility. And parents do this naturally. I mean, it would be weird if a parent was still trying their 15-year-old shoelaces up, right? It's somewhat natural for parents to back off from certain parts of being human the older a child gets. And the older that child gets, the more they need to feel responsible or capable of doing things on their own. Parents can really help with this in a variety of different ways. Giving children age-appropriate chores is a great way of doing this. A 15-year-old, for example, it might be appropriate to have them mow the lawn once a week as part of being in the family or to earn their allowance. But the first time this kid mows the lawn, they might struggle to figure out how it's done. But part of their self-esteem comes from struggling, working it out, and feeling pleased having worked through the problem and got the lawn mowed. That would not happen if dad was helicoptering and rushed in to fix it or do the lawn mowing for that kid before they had a chance to try and do it themselves. It seems that William was never really given the responsibility to cook his own breakfast or iron his own clothes, and I might assume his parents were doing those sort of things for him. In doing so, though, they were depriving him of feeling capable and confident of being a grown-up who can work toasters and iron a shirt. It might actually have had an even worse effect because the unspoken message that is conveyed there is that the parent doesn't see their child as being capable of cooking breakfast or ironing their clothes, which just enforces the idea in the child that they should be dependent instead of independent. And there's a sense of learned helplessness that goes on when your parents are undermining your capability and capacity to do new and scary grown-up things. I hope that helps you begin to understand helicopter parenting and anxiety a little bit more. I have so much more to say about parenting, helicopter parenting, and a ton to say on anxiety. So please hit follow and subscribe, and I'll keep you posted. Don't forget to take that quiz on mypeoplepatterns.com. The link is below, and you can stay in touch with us, and I'll send you emails on anxiety and parenting and all kinds of good stuff.